My name is Cameron Mitchell, and today I'm going to tell you how a clumsy lie about lost keys turned into the most beautiful confession I've ever heard. But before we get there, I need you to understand who I was before that night changed absolutely everything. Please subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. At 27 years old, my life was a symphony of meticulous routines that I'd orchestrated with mathematical precision. I work as a digital archivist in the climate-controlled basement of the Portland Museum of Natural History, an underground kingdom where silence is king and predictability is my religion. For 8 hours a day, I catalog and preserve historical documents digitally, turning pages yellowed by time into eternal pixels that will last for centuries to come. The basement is my personal sanctuary. Metal shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, holding decades of the city's history in numbered boxes with labels I created myself. The constant aroma of old paper mixes with chemical preservation products, creating a unique scent that I've grown to love. The hypnotic hum of the dehumidifiers forms a comforting soundtrack to my days, punctuated only by the soft click of my keyboard and the occasional whir of high-resolution scanners. I always arrive at 7:30 in the morning, 15 minutes earlier than necessary, because I like the feeling of having the building all to myself in those first moments. I check the digital humidity meters, start the scanning systems, and dive into a world populated by faded photographs, handwritten letters from people long gone, and official documents that witnessed events that shaped our city. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. See the link in the description right now. My lunch is invariably the same: a turkey and Swiss cheese sandwich that I make the night before, eaten in silence at my desk while I monitor the progress of the equipment. I don't have coworkers in the traditional sense of the word. The museum is big, but the digital archives department is just me, an administrative decision that suits me perfectly. I moved to Portland 8 months ago to take this specialized job, leaving behind an already limited social life in Sacramento. In California, I had some acquaintances from my previous job, but nothing I could genuinely call a friendship. The move was more of a continuation than a break. I just swapped one basement for another, one solitary routine for a slightly different one. My personality has always leaned toward introversion. I find genuine comfort in the predictability and control that my profession offers. Every digitized document is a small victory. Every cataloged file is a tangible proof of productivity. I don't have to negotiate with difficult personalities. I don't have to navigate complex social dynamics, or feign interest in small talk about the weather or weekend sports scores. But I recognize that even I, with all my preference for solitude, have a basic human need for connection that I can't completely suppress. It was this reluctant admission that led me, 3 months after moving, to look for some structured social activity where I could interact with other people without the pressure of deep relationships or extensive social commitments. I discovered bowling almost by chance. I was walking past the Strike Zone bowling alley on my way home from the grocery store one ordinary Thursday, when I saw a sign in the window advertising openings for a weekly league. Something about the precision of the sport resonated deeply with my organized nature. The math of the angles, the consistency of the movements, the tangible satisfaction of knocking down all 10 pins in a perfect shot. I timidly signed up on a Tuesday in May, explaining to the guy at the front desk that I was new to town and looking for a regular activity. He pointed me to the Pin Pals team, who apparently needed a 5th player after one of the original members moved to Seattle. That's how I met Derek Sullivan. Derek is everything I'm not, and maybe that's exactly why he fascinates me so much. At 29, he has a magnetic presence that transforms any room. A natural captain for our team, he has this rare ability to make everyone feel important and included, even someone as visibly out of place as I was at the beginning. Physically, Derek is the kind of guy who gets attention effortlessly. Dark brown hair always perfectly tousled, as if he'd just woken up, but still looked ready for a photo shoot. Green eyes that sparkle when he tells his stories. And Derek always has stories to tell. He's an average height, but with a confident posture that makes him seem bigger. His hands are expressive and move constantly when he talks, drawing shapes in the air that somehow make his words more vivid. He works at his uncle's construction company, a family business that's been around for 3 generations. Derek always talks about it casually, as if it's just a temporary job, although I suspect he likes it more than he lets on. There's something in the way his eyes light up when he describes a particularly challenging project, or how his hands move when he explains construction techniques to us other players. Socially, Derek is a phenomenon. He knows at least half the people at the bowling alley, greets employees by name, and remembers details about the other players' lives that I could never process. During our weekly games, he's the gravitational center around which we all orbit, encouraging when someone messes up, celebrating every strike as if it were a personal achievement, and always keeping the mood light and fun. And for all these months, I've been watching Derek from a distance with a mix of admiration and something I prefer not to name. Initially, I told myself it was just respect for the natural way he leads the team. Then, I convinced myself it was envy of the social ease he demonstrates. But as the weeks turned into months, it became impossible to ignore the truth. I was developing feelings for Derek that went far beyond casual admiration between teammates. The problem, of course, is that Derek is seemingly straight. At least, that's the impression I get from the rare times he mentions past dates or relationships, always referring to women. Besides, even if there was some possibility, Derek is so far out of my league that the very idea seems absurd. He's charismatic, popular, confident, the kind of person who would probably never notice someone like me if it weren't for the circumstantial need for a fifth player for the team. So I settled for admiring him from a distance. During our weekly get-togethers, I strategically positioned myself to have the best possible view of Derek without looking obvious. I've memorized the way he laughs. A genuine, hearty laugh that starts in his chest and spreads across his entire face. I pay attention to his usual gestures, how he runs his hand through his hair when he's focused, or how his eyes narrow slightly when he's analyzing a difficult shot. I've developed an almost encyclopedic understanding of Derek's habits and preferences. I know he always orders the same beer, a Budweiser in a bottle, never a can. That he has a habit of rubbing his hands on his shirt before each throw, a personal concentration ritual. That he celebrates his teammates' strikes with more enthusiasm than his own. That his favorite jokes are terrible bowling-related puns that he repeats without embarrassment every week. I've also learned that Derek has layers that aren't immediately obvious. During post-game conversations, when some players stick around for a few more beers, he occasionally lets slip comments that reveal an unexpected depth. He talks about books he's reading, usually biographies of famous architects or construction history. He mentions dreams of opening his own interior design business, something that combines his construction experience with an artistic side that he rarely shows publicly. It's in these moments that I feel a deeper connection to Derek, as if I'm seeing the real person behind the charismatic persona. But these glimpses are rare and fleeting, quickly replaced by the public Derek who knows and is known by everyone. My weekly routine started to revolve entirely around Tuesdays. On the other 6 days, I live in anticipation or in remembrance of the time spent with the team. Specifically, the time spent observing Derek. It's pathetic, I admit, but it's also the only thing in my life that generates genuine excitement. Tuesdays start differently from the other mornings. I wake up with a subtle energy that's absent on other days. At work, I check the clock more often, mentally counting the hours until I can trade my cotton uniform for jeans and a polo shirt. At 7 in the evening, I drive to the Strike Zone bowling alley with a mix of anticipation and nervousness that never wanes, no matter how many times I've made this same journey. The bowling alley at night is a completely different world from my silent work environment. Colored lights reflect on the waxed lanes, pop music plays at a moderate volume on the speakers, and there's a vibrant social energy that initially intimidated me, but that I've learned to appreciate. The sound of balls rolling and pins falling creates a constant percussion that becomes hypnotic after a few games. Our team always meets at lane number 7. Besides Derek and me, there's Marcus, a 50-something accountant who's been bowling for 20 years and never misses an opportunity to give unsolicited technical advice. Jennifer, an on-call nurse who uses bowling to de-stress after particularly difficult shifts at the hospital. And Tom, a retiree from Boeing, who treats every game as if we were competing for the World Championship. Initially, I was clearly the weakest link in the group, both in skill and social integration. My throws were inconsistent, and my conversation was limited to polite answers when asked a direct question. But Derek, being Derek, made a point of including me from day one. He offered technical tips without sounding condescending, made jokes that included me without making me the target of them, and gradually created a space where even someone like me could feel part of something bigger. Over the months, my bowling skill improved significantly. I'm not the best player on the team. That title unequivocally belongs to Derek, but I'm no longer a liability either. I've developed a consistent technique, learned to read the lanes, and occasionally even get a strike that genuinely contributes to our collective score. More importantly, I've learned to navigate the social dynamics of the group. I discovered that I can contribute to conversations when the topic revolves around local history. My professional expertise finally found a social use. I've developed a few of my own jokes, usually terrible puns related to archives and organization that the group has come to expect and even appreciate. But during all these positive developments, my feelings for Derek only intensified. Every kind gesture, every smile directed at me, every moment of individual attention fueled a flame that I knew was impossible but couldn't extinguish. I started to interpret normal interactions as potential signs, only to remind myself moments later of the reality of the situation. Derek treats everyone on the team with the same kindness and attention he shows me. His natural charisma extends equally to Marcus, Jennifer, Tom, and every other player we meet during our games. There's nothing special or unique about the way he interacts with me, except in my increasingly active imagination. It was in this state of silent, resigned admiration that we arrived at the Tuesday that would change everything. It was an October night, the air starting to carry that characteristic autumnal crispness of the Pacific Northwest. Our team had just won a crucial victory in the league's regional playoffs, an achievement we all knew was almost entirely due to Derek's exceptional skills. The mood at the bowling alley was euphoric. Other teams came to congratulate us on the victory. The bowling alley staff offered us celebratory drinks on the house, and even Tom, usually the most reserved of the group, was visibly emotional about our win. Derek was beaming. His smile seemed even brighter than usual, his gestures more expressive, his contagious energy spreading throughout the area around Lane 7. He graciously accepted the congratulations, but always deflected the credit to the team as a whole, insisting that the victory was a collective effort, even when we all knew he had carried our score. It was during this celebration that Derek approached me with an expression I'd never seen before. For a moment, the charismatic mask seemed to slip, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. His green eyes, normally full of confidence, had an almost hesitant quality. "Cameron," he said, running his hand through his hair in a more nervous version of his usual gesture. "I'm kind of screwed today." I felt my stomach clench. Derek never admitted to problems or vulnerabilities. Hearing him confess a difficulty was like seeing a crack in a statue I'd always believed to be unbreakable. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual despite the sudden increase in my heart rate. "I lost my keys at the construction site today. I was helping to unload heavy materials, and they must have fallen out of my pocket. I only noticed when I was leaving to come here." Derek looked around the bowling alley, as if searching for a solution in the colored lights and the celebratory buzz. "My roommate is visiting family in Seattle, so there's no one to let me in." He hesitated, and I realized he was struggling with something. Pride, maybe, or just the natural reluctance to ask for favors. "Could you— I know it's weird to ask, especially since we don't know each other very well outside of here, but could you give me a ride home? Or let me sleep on your couch tonight? I promise I'll get the key situation sorted out first thing tomorrow morning." The world around me seemed to slow down. Derek Sullivan, the man I'd silently admired for months, was asking me for help. Not just a ride, but potentially to spend the night at my place. The situation seemed so unlikely that for a moment I wondered if I was daydreaming. "Of course," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness of my own voice. "No problem at all." The relief on Derek's face was immediate and genuine. "Really? Man, you saved me. I was starting to imagine a whole night on a park bench or paying a fortune for a hotel." "Don't be ridiculous," I said, feeling a newfound courage. "My apartment isn't big, but the couch is comfortable, and I can make dinner for us." "Are you sure it won't be a bother?" Derek asked, but he was already smiling that way that made my heart race. "I'm sure," I confirmed, though inside I was in total panic about what this situation could mean for my carefully maintained emotional balance. The drive to my apartment was surreal. Derek was sitting in the passenger seat of my Honda Civic, messing with the radio and commenting on the team's victory as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I tried to stay focused on driving while processing the impossible reality of the situation. Derek Sullivan was in my car, going to my house, where he would spend the night. My apartment is in a modest complex 15 minutes from the bowling alley, an 80s two-story building that offers exactly the kind of anonymity I've always preferred. As we climbed the stairs to the second floor, I suddenly felt embarrassed by the decor choices I'd made. Would my minimalist taste be too obvious? Would Derek notice how structured and solitary my life was just by looking at my furniture? But when I opened the door, Derek walked in with genuine curiosity instead of the judgment I feared. "Wow, this is so organized," he commented, observing the shelves lined with books categorized by historical period, and the few bowling trophies discreetly arranged on a side shelf. It looks exactly like I imagined it would. It's small, I muttered, suddenly aware of every detail of the space I considered my personal refuge. It's cozy, Derek corrected, examining a framed reproduction of a Portland map from 1850 that I'd hung on the living room wall. So you basically travel in time every day at work? There was something different in his voice, less of the usual bravado he displayed at the bowling alley, more thoughtful and genuinely interested. I briefly explained my work at the museum, surprised to find that Derek asked intelligent questions about digital preservation and the challenges of keeping historical documents accessible to future generations. It must be amazing to have that kind of connection to the past, he said, still studying the old map. Have you ever found anything really surprising in the archives? I told him about a letter I'd digitized the previous week, written by an Irish immigrant in 1889 describing his first impression of Portland. Derek listened with genuine attention, making comments that showed he was really processing what I was saying, rather than just being polite. I offered to cook dinner, explaining that I only had ingredients for a simple meal. I can make some pasta with marinara sauce, I said, opening the kitchen cabinets. Let me help, Derek offered, taking off his jacket and rolling up his shirt sleeves. My mom always insisted that all her kids knew how to cook. She said a man who can't feed himself properly will never be able to take care of anyone else. I watched Derek handle a knife with precise movements, chopping garlic and onions with a technique that revealed real experience in the kitchen. His hands moved with confidence, and I realized there was something hypnotic about the focused way he performed even simple tasks. Do you cook a lot? I asked, trying to make conversation while the water for the pasta boiled. More than I should admit to the construction guys, Derek replied with a smile. They already give me enough crap about other things. What other things? Derek hesitated for a moment, as if he was deciding how much to reveal. Then, to my surprise, he pulled a crumpled notebook from the back pocket of his jeans. The pages were full of detailed sketches, floor plans, furniture designs, room layouts that showed a genuine artistic talent. Working in construction is temporary, he explained, flipping through the pages with fingers that suddenly seemed shy. My real plan is to open my own interior design company. Combine what I've learned about construction with this. The drawings were impressive. There was an aesthetic sensitivity in the designs that completely contrasted with the image Derek projected at the bowling alley. Every line was deliberate, every proportion carefully considered. I realized I was seeing a side of him that probably very few people knew. Derek, these drawings are incredible, I said, and the vulnerability that crossed his face made me realize that my opinion really mattered to him. You really think so? Sometimes I wonder if it's just a silly hobby. No way. There's a real sensibility here. You can see spaces in a way that most people can't. Dinner was a revelation. Derek, away from the social environment of the bowling alley, proved to be thoughtful and surprisingly introspective. He talked about his plans for the future, his fears about leaving the stable job at his uncle's company to pursue something riskier, and how he sometimes felt he was living a version of himself that wasn't completely authentic. It's weird, he said, playing with the last bits of pasta on his plate. At the bowling alley, I'm always the funny guy, the leader, the one who keeps everyone hyped. But sometimes it's tiring to always be on, you know? I understood perfectly. It's like playing a role, I agreed. Exactly, and you seem to be the same person everywhere. That must be so freeing. The observation caught me by surprise. I had never thought of my behavioral consistency as a positive thing. I'd always seen it as a social limitation. As the night went on, we settled into the living room to watch TV. Derek chose an old sci-fi movie that was on, something about alien invaders in the 50s. The volume was low, creating an intimate atmosphere in the dimly lit apartment. Initially, we kept a respectful distance on the couch, but Derek gradually started to relax. He'd occasionally comment on the movie, making jokes about the dated special effects or the melodramatic acting. His presence in my personal space was both comforting and electrifying. Cameron, he said softly during a quiet moment in the film, do you mind if I sit closer? The couch is kind of uncomfortable to lie on, and I'm starting to feel the weight of the day. My heart pounded, but I tried to keep my voice steady. Sure, no problem. Derek moved across the couch until he was right next to me. The warmth of his body was immediately noticeable, and I could smell the subtle scent of the soap he used mixed with a faint trace of the bowling alley environment. Somehow, I could never explain the exact progression. Derek ended up leaning against me. Thanks, he whispered, adjusting his position until his head rested on my shoulder. I hope this isn't too weird. It's not weird, I lied. Because in reality, it was the strangest and most wonderful thing I'd ever experienced. The weight of Derek's head on my shoulder created an intimacy I had never imagined possible. Every breath of his seemed to synchronize with mine, and I had to consciously focus on not letting my own breathing become irregular. His hand rested casually on my arm, fingers occasionally moving slightly when something in the movie made him react. As the minutes passed, Derek relaxed even more against me. His body gradually adjusted to mine, finding a comfortable position that felt natural despite being completely new. I could feel the texture of his hair against my cheek when he moved slightly, and the sound of his breathing becoming deeper as the day's fatigue started to win him over. "This movie is terrible," Derek murmured, but his voice was sleepy and content. "It's horribly bad," I agreed, although honestly I wasn't paying any attention to the screen. "But somehow it's relaxing," he added, settling even more deeply against me. Derek started to fall asleep during the second act of the movie. His breathing deepened and his muscles relaxed completely, turning him into a comforting weight against my chest and shoulder. I remained completely still, almost not breathing, absorbing every sensation of the experience. It was then that the moment that would change everything happened. Derek, in a state of semi-consciousness, moved slightly against me and whispered words that seemed to emerge from somewhere deep and vulnerable. "The spare room is my chest." The words came out like a dreamy, almost poetic confession as he nestled even more deeply against me. His hands instinctively found the fabric of my shirt, fingers gently curling into the cotton as if he wanted to anchor himself there, to somehow merge with me in a primitive, comforting way. The emotional impact of those words was devastating. Derek had, unconsciously, described my chest as a place of refuge, a temporary home where he found comfort. The metaphor was so unexpectedly poetic that I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Every beat of my heart echoed in the silence of the apartment, and I was sure Derek could feel them through his face pressed against my chest. The moment was both sweet and torturous. I finally had Derek in my arms, but only in a state of unconscious vulnerability. Derek was breathing deeply now, completely asleep, and occasionally mumbled indistinct words. At one point, he moved slightly, and his lips lightly touched the curve of my neck. It was just a fleeting, probably unconscious touch, but the sensation sent electrical waves through my entire body. I spent the whole night awake, memorizing every detail of those hours. The weight of Derek's arms around my waist when he adjusted in his sleep. The soft sound of his dreams, occasionally interrupted by contented sighs. The way his breath tickled my skin when he turned his face slightly. I watched the subtle changes in the light coming through the windows as the night progressed into dawn. Derek was sleeping deeply, seemingly more relaxed than I had ever seen him at the bowling alley. Without the charismatic social mask, he seemed younger, more vulnerable, more real. When dawn finally came, filtering golden light through the living room curtains, Derek began to wake up slowly. His eyes opened gradually, disoriented for a moment before they focused on where he was. "Sorry," he murmured, pulling away quickly and running his hands through his hair in an embarrassed version of his usual gesture. His cheeks were slightly flushed. I didn't mean to invade your space like that. It must have been super uncomfortable for you." "It wasn't uncomfortable," I replied, although everything inside me screamed the opposite when he pulled away, breaking the physical contact that had sustained me through the night. Derek got up from the couch, clearly embarrassed by the inadvertent intimacy we had shared. He stretched his muscles and looked around as if he was reorienting himself. "I need to call a locksmith," he said, returning to practical mode. "Sorry for causing this whole situation." I offered him my phone and made coffee while Derek made the necessary calls. Breakfast was politely uncomfortable, a dramatic change from the naturalness of the night before. Derek thanked me repeatedly for the hospitality, but there was a forced formality in his manner that hadn't existed before. "The locksmith said he can meet me at the apartment in an hour," Derek announced after finishing his second cup of coffee. "I'll call an Uber so I don't bother you anymore." "I can take you," I offered, but he shook his head. "You've already done too much." "Seriously, Cameron, I don't know how to thank you." When Derek finally left, the apartment suddenly felt empty and silent in a way I had never experienced before. The smell of his soap still lingered subtly in the air, and I found myself unconsciously touching the spot on the couch where he had slept. In the days that followed, I constantly relived every moment of that night. The words, "The spare room is my chest," echoed in my mind in infinite loops. At work, I'd find myself touching my own chest, remembering the weight of Derek's head there, questioning whether I had imagined the whole intimacy, or if something truly significant had happened. The following Tuesday at the bowling alley was torture. Derek was different, quieter, avoiding direct eye contact with me. During the game, he kept his interactions with me strictly related to the sport, without the casual conversation that normally characterized our get-togethers. The team played well, but there was a palpable tension that the other members clearly noticed, although no one commented on it directly. Derek was still charismatic with Marcus, Jennifer, and Tom, but with me, he was visibly uncomfortable, as if the involuntary intimacy of the previous week had created a barrier instead of a bridge. After the game, when the other team members had already left for their respective homes, Derek finally approached me. His hands were trembling slightly, and I recognized the same vulnerability I had seen the previous week when he asked for the ride. "I need to tell you something," Derek said, looking at the floor instead of facing me directly. "About last week, about the keys." I lied. I felt my stomach drop as if I had just lost the ground beneath my feet. "About what?" Derek looked up, and I saw something I had never seen before. Genuine fear mixed with desperate determination. The keys. I didn't lose the keys at the construction site, and my roommate wasn't visiting family in Seattle. The world seemed to stop. "Why?" "Because I made it all up," Derek confessed, his voice getting stronger as he found the courage to continue. "I made up an elaborate excuse because I wanted to spend time with you, and I'm too much of a coward to just ask." The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. "I don't understand." "You build walls around yourself, Cameron," Derek said softly, finally looking at me directly. "Walls that I've been trying to figure out how to get through for months. I watch you during our games. I see how you process information, how you genuinely care about people even when you're trying to keep your distance. You're different from anyone I've ever met." My mind struggled to process what I was hearing. "You were watching me?" "Constantly," Derek admitted with a shaky smile. "And I thought I'd never have a real chance to get to know you better, unless I created a situation where you were forced to lower your guard. It was manipulative and cowardly, and I'm sorry for that." Before I could fully process the confession or formulate a proper response, Derek took a step forward and kissed me. It was soft at first, hesitant, as if he was still testing whether he had read the situation correctly. But when I felt my own lips instinctively responding to his touch, the kiss deepened, loaded with months of repressed tension and unexpressed feelings. When we pulled apart, Derek whispered against my lips, "I'm sorry if I got it all wrong." "You didn't get it wrong," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness of my own voice. Then, summoning a courage I never knew I had, I pulled Derek back for another kiss, more confident this time, communicating without words everything I had felt during those months of silent admiration. The days that followed our first kiss at the bowling alley were like learning to breathe in a completely new way. Derek and I started to get to know each other outside the structured context of the weekly games, discovering layers of each other that we had never imagined existed. Our first phone call happened the following Thursday. Derek called at 9 at night, his voice slightly nervous in a way that contrasted with his usual confidence. "Hey, Cameron, I hope it's not too late to call," he began. "I was thinking, would you like to have dinner with me on Saturday? Somewhere quiet where we can really talk?" We chose a small Italian restaurant in a residential neighborhood, away from the downtown hustle and places where we might run into other team members. The intimacy of the setting allowed us to explore conversational territories we had only scratched the surface of that night in my apartment. Derek told me about his childhood as the youngest of 4 siblings, growing up in a family that valued both hard work and creative expression. His father was an electrician, his mother an art teacher at an elementary school, and the house was always full of construction projects and ongoing artistic creations. "I learned to use tools before I learned to write properly," Derek said, smiling as he played with the last bits of pasta on his plate. "But my mom also taught me that creating something beautiful is just as important as building something functional." I realized that this philosophy was reflected in everything about Derek, from his design drawings to the way he led our bowling team, always balancing practicality with an intuitive aesthetic sense. I, in turn, shared stories about my own upbringing as the only child of 2 academic librarians. My parents, although loving, were naturally introspective people who valued knowledge and reflection above social interaction. I grew up in a house full of books and intellectual conversations, but with few opportunities to develop spontaneous social skills. "That's why you're so observant," Derek commented. "You learn to understand people through patterns and analysis instead of direct interaction." The observation was surprisingly insightful, and I recognized that Derek had identified something about my personality that had taken me years to fully understand myself. Our relationship developed gradually over the following weeks. Derek respected my need to process changes slowly, and I learned to appreciate his spontaneity without feeling overwhelmed. We established rhythms that worked for both of us: quiet dinners during the week, walks on Sundays through the city parks, and always Tuesdays at the bowling alley, where we gradually revealed our new dynamic to the rest of the team. Marcus was the first to notice that something had changed between us. "You two are different," he commented after a particularly successful game in November. "More in sync, somehow." Jennifer, with her keen nurse's intuition, simply smiled when Derek and I arrived at the bowling alley together one Tuesday, instead of meeting up there as we always did. "It was about time," she said, and from her tone of voice it was clear that she had suspected our feelings long before we even admitted them to ourselves. The relationship wasn't without its challenges. Derek was used to being socially dominant, while I needed space to process emotions and situations. We had our first real argument in December, when Derek planned a surprise party for my birthday without consulting me first. "I thought you'd be happy," he said, clearly hurt by my initial panicked reaction. "I just invited a few people from the bowling alley and some of my friends from work." I explained with more patience than I felt at the moment that social surprises made me anxious, especially when they involved people I didn't know well. Derek was initially defensive, interpreting my need for control as a rejection of his efforts. But then he stopped, took a deep breath, and really listened to what I was trying to communicate. "You're telling me you need to mentally prepare for social situations," he said slowly, processing the information. "Like creating an internal game plan?" "Exactly." From that moment on, Derek started including me in the planning of any social activity that involved other people. And I, recognizing the genuine effort he was making to understand my perspective, started to make an effort to be more flexible with smaller changes in plans. In January, Derek showed me the space he was considering renting for his future design business. It was an old warehouse converted into studios for artists and small creative businesses, with large windows that filled the room with natural light and original hardwood floors that had been restored. "I can see exactly what it would be like," Derek said, walking through the empty space while gesturing to show where he would put his drawing table, material samples, and a meeting area for clients. His eyes shone with a vision that I could almost see materializing around us. "When do you plan to make the transition?" I asked. "Mid-year, if all goes well. I've already saved enough for the first 6 months of rent, and I have some potential clients interested." Derek hesitated, then added, "I was wondering if you'd like to help me with the administrative side of the business. Your organizational skills would be perfect for cataloging projects and keeping client records." The suggestion completely caught me by surprise. Derek was including me in his most important professional plans, entrusting me with crucial aspects of his entrepreneurial dream. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It would be a big change for me too." "I'm sure," Derek replied, taking my hands. "I want to build this with you, Cameron. Not just the business, but everything." It was in that moment, standing in an empty warehouse lit by the Portland winter sun, that I finally understood that our relationship had transformed into something much deeper and more lasting than I had initially allowed myself to hope for. 2 months later, on a particularly sunny Sunday in March, Derek and I were lying on the same couch where it had all begun. He had officially moved into my apartment the previous week, bringing his few pieces of furniture and turning my meticulously organized space into an interesting mix of functionality and artistic creativity. We were watching the same bad sci-fi movie that had been on TV that first night, but this time as a deliberate and nostalgic choice. Derek was again lying on my chest, but now we were both completely awake and aware of the intimacy we shared. "Do you remember what I said that first night?" Derek asked softly, tracing lazy circles on my arm with his fingertips. "The spare room is my chest," I quoted, smiling at the familiarity of the words that had become a kind of personal mantra between us. "It's still true," Derek said, settling in more comfortably against me. "In fact, it's even more true now. This is my favorite place in the whole world." I looked down, observing the way Derek's brown hair was spread against my shirt, how his fingers rested naturally on my arm, how his breathing had found a rhythm synchronized with mine. In the months since that first night, we had learned to navigate the differences in our personalities, finding ways to honor both my need for stability and his creative impulse. Derek had officially left his job at his uncle's construction company the previous week, and his new design studio would open the following month. I had negotiated a part-time agreement with the museum, allowing me to keep my archivist job while helping Derek establish the administrative systems for his business. Our bowling team had celebrated these changes with an informal party at the strike zone, where Marcus toasted to the most unlikely but most perfect couple we've ever known. Jennifer had shed a few emotional tears, and even Tom, normally reserved, had admitted that, "You two complete each other in a way that just makes sense." "Do you ever regret it?" Derek asked suddenly, interrupting my thoughts. "All this change, I mean. Your life was so organized before I showed up with my lies about lost keys." I considered the question seriously. My life had truly changed dramatically. My apartment now contained design sketches scattered on the kitchen table, material samples piled in a corner of the living room, and Derek's constant energy filling spaces that were once silent. My carefully structured routine had become more flexible, adapting to the needs of a relationship and an emerging professional partnership. "I don't regret anything," I answered honestly. "But sometimes I still can't believe you made up a whole story just to spend a night here." Derek laughed, the sound vibrating through my chest. "It wasn't my most elegant plan, I admit. But it worked, didn't it? It worked perfectly." As the afternoon turned into evening, we stayed lying together, occasionally commenting on the absurdly bad movie on TV, but mostly enjoying the simplicity of the moment. Derek eventually fell asleep, as he had that first night. But this time, I also allowed myself to completely relax. Before I fell asleep, I reflected on how my understanding of home had completely transformed. For years, I had associated home with places: my apartment, my office at the museum, even my favorite lane at the bowling alley. But Derek had taught me that home isn't really about physical location. Home is the sound of someone you love's breathing synchronizing with your own. It's the feeling of being completely known and accepted by another person. It's the courage to drop all your defenses and allow someone to see not only your strengths, but also your vulnerabilities and fears. Derek had transformed my world not through dramatic gestures or grand declarations, but through clumsy lies told out of hope, confessions whispered in dreams, and the gentle persistence of someone willing to tear down carefully built walls brick by brick. That night, as I fell asleep with Derek safe in my arms, I finally understood that true love rarely arrives in the way we expect. Sometimes it comes disguised as a favor between teammates, hidden in lies about lost keys, revealed in poetic words murmured in sleep. And sometimes, if we're lucky enough, it teaches us that home isn't a place we find, but the comforting rhythm of the right person's heart beating against our own chest. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. See the link in the description right now. If this story moved you and you want to continue following real stories about love, connection, and the courage to follow your heart, don't forget to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel by hitting the bell to not miss any of our next episodes. And tell me in the comments, have you ever made up an excuse to get closer to someone special? What was it like? Your story could be the next one we tell here. See you next time, everyone,